hit record. So before we kind of kick off the official conversation, Suzanne and Max Lang are here with me today. We're going to talk about their books, their character, Grumpy Monkey. It's something that I've talked about here on the Spaniard show, and I've had fun with in my own life with my kids and myself. But before we get to that, I do want to point this out. We're having kind of like microphone audio lessons 101. And they have a fancy mic like Dred and I have. And we were trying to figure out the settings, and I reassured them. And if you've been listening to the show for a long time, you know, like Dred and I still mess up on a regular basis. So I actually felt good, like, wow, I can help someone with these skills that 99% of people don't care about. So I think we've got it figured out. So welcome to the show, Suzanne and Max.
Hello, thank you. And thank you for the microphone.
Yeah.
Our first time using a fancy microphone, and we admit to being, illiterate when it comes to technology.
Yeah, whatever that version is for technology, I hear you. I was just telling them, if you listened to the books episode today, after the fact, when I was getting ready for this episode, I realized my mic wasn't even plugged in. So I recorded the books episode today with my computer audio. So that came out poorly as well. So it's only like the 1500th book episode I've done. I'll catch on here soon. So I want to kind of dive into getting to know you guys, Max and Suzanne, whose books, Grumpy Monkey, there's 3 or 4 books total in that series.
There's 3 books and the 4th one coming out in September.
A fourth, yeah, there's a 4th picture book. So there's 3 picture books.
Yeah.
Then a Christmas one is coming out. But it comes out in September, I guess, to get a run up.
Yeah.
In September, but and so those are the picture books. And then we just had our first what they call early graphic reader come out, which is like a graphic novel, but for sort of, generally speaking, because every kid reads at their own pace and whatever, but generally speaking, I'd say graphic novel for ages, for like kindergarten through 3rd grade, sort of, or 1st through 3rd grade. So that's just come out. And then we've just had, or are about to have Tuesday, it's actually Tuesday, 2 books come out that are called, a type of book called Step Into Reading. So these are the like industry jargon is they call leveled readers. So these are meant for children as they're learning to read. And they come at different levels depending on what level reader the child is. So we have our first ever leveled readers coming out, and they are level 2, which if you look on the back of the book, it'll say that's generally for preschool through 1st grade, as they're just starting to be able to read on their own with a little bit of help. So those are also coming out. Very
That's
soon.
cool. I didn't know about the Christmas version, and I didn't know about the leveled books, and I'm pretty sure I'm living that real time, because my daughter is now in 2nd grade. So she learned to read primarily last year during quarantine, which was a whole thing in and of itself. And then my son they'll be 8 and 5 in September, and we have those leveled reading books, 1, 2, 3, 4, whatever it is. A couple different series are built on that system as well. So that's cool. I didn't know they were coming out.
Yeah, so that was a completely new, I mean, we were aware of those books also as parents, and but as kind of writers and illustrators, like that was a new thing, because those books, as you can imagine, have a very specific set of parameters depending what level it is. There's rules about how many lines and words on a page, what kind of words you can use, and so on. So that was, but it was really fun to, I don't know, I like the challenge of the parameters. I think you do too. Like we love that. It's kind of a fun challenge when you're given like these rules, but how do we still make our characters and our world and our tone come through within those parameters? So that was.
I get that, and you're talking to a book aficionado, and I know Dred, who produces this, and some of the listeners are as well. But I appreciate that, because I've read those books and I've thought to myself, like my daughter, I'm reading them, and I think, like, how do they know this is like 1-2 level? Or they're like, it's a certain number of verbs, certain number of words, can't use this tense, that tense. So it's interesting for you as writers to have to fit within those parameters.
Yeah, and then there's like a whole document that exists from our publisher that describes exactly that for each level. And so they kind of, I can't quite remember when they approached us about this. they had in their minds, like, they didn't say you have to do level 2, but I feel like they said what level 1 or 2 is what we have in mind for Grumpy Monkey for leveled readers.
Yeah.
If memory serves, I don't know. And then kind of we said, well, let us give it a try. And I think they saw what we did and they said, okay, that looks like a level 2.
Yeah.
I feel like that's how it played out.
I was going to ask that, and that maybe you just answered it. Is it Grumpy Monkey? Is that what the leveled reading series will be? Grumpy
That's
Monkey?
still Grumpy Monkey, yeah. So
Yeah.
I have to say our publisher, which is Random House, have been so supportive of the Grumpy Monkey brand, and they're
I love it.
We can't.
Yeah,
We can't see them on the podcast, but we're holding
well,
up.
I'll post this on YouTube. But that's awesome. It's so cool, and I want to get into the specifics of Grumpy Monkey and why, to me, it's like the funniest thing ever.
I'm glad you're picking up on some of our jokes.
So I want to get into a story here about that. The first one we read, but I'll talk about the young not graphic novel, but graphic picture book. So I just ordered. I didn't even know what it was. I just ordered it when I saw that it came out, and I read it. So I have 2 of the picture books and then the freshly squeezed, and it's written like comic book style, but graphic novel, but kid book, if you can combine those things together. And the gist of it is Grumpy Monkey wants to go for a walk in the woods. He has this like calamitous friends that just make noise and they're super annoying, and all he wants is peace and quiet. And he has this mantra that says squeeze, squeeze, mind at ease, and he's got this orange. So you're saying it's for like kindergarten to whatever, but I'm reading, I honestly, goodness, I think I did read it to my kids, but I read it for myself. And I was just thinking, like, my kids are little. I don't know how old your kids are, but mine are little. And I'm thinking, this is all I want. I just want a peaceful walk, a peaceful moment. So it connects to everyone.
Well, that's the Grumpy Monkey is not 100% me, but but if you go to the back of that book and you read my bio, you'll see just specific to that book, it says that I like to take a walk every Wednesday. So that completely came out of truth, and it came out of it. We wrote that book pre-pandemic, and so it was more unusual that, like, Max usually is working out of the house pre-pandemic, and I work from home. And so Wednesdays my routine was always on Wednesday after the kids are at school. Before I start work, I go for a walk. And it's my nice, peaceful Wednesday walk. Every now and then, Max would have a work from home day. And if it happened to be on a Wednesday, he would be like, oh, I'll come too. And I'd be like,
nope. That's funny.
And I did bring an apple, actually.
okay. The apple, I don't even know if you brought it on. Well, yeah, you did. Okay, he's brought it on the walk. But the apple thing is not just about walks. The apple thing that's definitely like a spouse thing. When Max eats an apple, like, you've never seen any, like, I know. He doesn't want anything to go to waste, but he literally eats it till there's just seed left.
I think you and I probably eat apples the same way. It's the way I eat cereal too, but it's just very loud. It's very like crisp. It's very slurpy.
Yes, it's so loud. It's so loud, and it goes on and on. And I'm always sat there like, are you finished? And every now and then you go through a phase where you're like, oh, this is my apple kick. Like, I'm in my apple kick. And where it feels like he's only eating apples and almonds. And
we'd be great housemates, because that's a large portion of what I eat. I don't know if you're into spicy stuff, but I started getting spicy almonds. I think it's blue, whatever that blue something brand of almonds is.
I know what you mean. Yeah. I know that brand.
They have spicy ones. I don't know if you like spice, but they're delicious.
I love spicy.
Yeah, we've definitely had some of them, right?
And we've had smoked almonds.
It's that same line, but listeners too. There's all kinds of pepper flavors. Max, can you talk about the art? So you do the art, the illustrations, correct?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay.
And I would say we work on the stories together, because picture books, so much of the storytelling happens in the pictures. So it's a lot of back and forth actually when we come up with the stories. But then I really focus on the pictures.
Actually, maybe we can backtrack a minute and then get into the art, the illustrated, the character itself. Max, can you talk a little bit about the creative process? Like you mentioned that there was some back and forth, but how does that work? You're a couple, so it's like there's a, like what is that dynamic, the creative dynamic like?
I think it changed a little bit over the years. I think the first Grumpy Monkey book that started, like, that came from an idea that was inspired by you, but then I thought, okay, Suzanne was actually saying like, oh, I need to be grumpy today. I was trying to cheer her up. She said, I need to be grumpy today. And I thought, oh, this would be a great idea for a picture book. And then I was kind of trying to develop into a picture book, and I was playing around with the idea. And at some point, Suzanne joined, and she really gave the characters the voice and like streamlined the story. And so that process took several years, I would say, between the first idea and until the book was actually coming out. There were like several years, a bit on and off, very on and off, I would say.
Lots of different versions. The art looks completely different.
Do you have those early iterations?
Let me see. I don't know if
Very
Always,
okay. This is
always fun to look back on.
Yeah. Look at that. And it was called Grumpy Day.
Wow.
And
that is really cool.
Yeah.
So if you're listening to this, my youtube.com/Charlie Spaniard, I'll put the video up, but they have the iterations of Grumpy Day, which is, I guess, the first iteration of Grumpy Monkey.
Which was just like self-published, like
Yeah.
like
It was just to test it, to show it to people.
Yeah. I that's why I'm asking this question, because I have probably too much of my, I want to ask about this here in a little bit, but like every $1 million idea I've had, which has not one of them has been $1 million idea, iterations of them saved on my drive, and I'm embarrassed by them. I laugh at them. I like to see where it comes from, so that's really cool to see the origins of Grumpy Monkey.
And I think that's really an important part for our process in general, is just start somewhere, even if it doesn't work at the beginning. You always have to iterate, you always have to try. It's like, oh, let's see where this is going, and then knowing that we'll get better by working on it together, by showing it to our editors, to our designers, like they have feedback. So it's never about like hitting a home run out of the park. That doesn't really happen. I would say it's always a lot of back and forth. But that said, now writing the newer books is slightly different, because we already know the characters a lot, especially Suzanne knows how these characters really think and work, and she has a backstory for every little critter you see in the book, and already ideas for where it's going to go. And so that process now is slightly different. We still work on it together a lot, especially we talk about the story. What do we want to tell? What do we want to say? Then at some point, Suzanne goes and writes a first draft, and I look at it from an illustrator's point of view and see like, oh, maybe we don't need that line. I can do that in the pictures, or I need a bit of support here to get that point across, like these little things. And then I start drawing as fast as possible, so we can look at it with sketches and really get a sense for how it feels as a picture book. It's not just the text, it's not just pictures, it's a picture book. So we want to look at it in that format as soon as possible.
Max, what was your? I want to get into the lives of a husband-wife picture book creation team. Like that kind of fascinates me in the first place. But what was your background like with art? Did you do it? I mean, I still don't know if this is how you both make a living, or if you have side things which we can get into. But what is your background in art, Max?
Well, I mean, I grew up in Germany, and I was always loved to draw. And I would say I always loved storytelling in general, but I'm actually working more in film. Like I work in animated films. I've directed some myself. I'm helping and working for big studios. But so I came through picture book illustration, working in animation, and actually Suzanne works in animation as well as a producer and a writer. And that's how we met. Yeah. So it was always kind of a creative connection, and we liked the same thing. We started working on things together. But the picture books itself, I would say that kind of started when our daughter was born, really. Like it was always something in the back of our head, say, maybe we could do that, maybe we could do that. And then it started with an idea that Suzanne had for our daughters. Like she wanted a book about different kinds of families, and she couldn't find that book. And she was like, yeah, maybe I can just write it myself. And you had an idea, you pitched it.
I think you said we can make it, because I just kept looking to buy, like, can I find this book that shows about the, kids in her, she was just starting preschool, and I was like, well, there were kids in her class that had divorced parents or kids who live with a grandparent. And like, how can I, I'd love for her to have a book about that. And we couldn't find that. And I would be asking friends, and we were living in England at the time, and I'd be asking friends, like, do you know of a book like this? And then Max heard me asking a friend, and I started like reciting a poem that I didn't even really realize was in my head, but it was the start of that. But I guess I was, reciting a poem that eventually became that book. And when Max heard that, he was like, oh, I didn't know you had like a thing in your head. Why don't we just make this for her?
Yeah.
And it just became a thing we wanted to make for our daughter.
And was that thing from the get-go what developed into Grumpy Monkey?
No, that was actually a different book. It's called Families, or All Kinds of Families.
Now they've renamed it All Kinds of Families.
But that was kind of our way into the publishing world. And just looping back to your question, we still make our money, or a lot of like income, through working in animation. That's my main job, really. And I do the picture books on the side as much as I can. I think you are focusing mostly on the picture books at this point.
Before the pandemic, I was doing both, like taking a lot of animation work and doing books. And then with everyone being home with school and everything, it became hard to do everything. But also the books started taking up more of our time, because Random House started asking for more Grumpy Monkey titles. And so I've now scaled back on the animation side. I'm focusing much more just on our publishing work, with a little bit still, like kind of one finger in animation. But
how old are your kids?
Almost 7. We got a birthday coming up, and 10.
Okay, so they're pretty young. Well, I guess a little bit older than mine, but
not. But same general, same general category.
My son has a birthday tomorrow. My daughter's in 3 weeks. So
we're. Oh, you're kidding?
Yeah, it's a fun time.
Oh, we've got a lot of September, October birthdays here. Yeah. Oh, funny.
Okay, so a question, like I alluded to, but it's the truth. I never considered myself a creative person. It was always just athletics, like get good grades and do your best in athletics. Post-fighting, it became like, okay, what now? And I kind of combined my career, like the hook of my fighting career, to teach lessons. But then I also fell into like this related but separate path of reading books and sharing what I'm reading and trying to promote learning, because learning is growth and growth is life, and it's all connected. It's all interrelated. And Dred and I have spent a million hours talking about different ideas, different things, different slogans, different everything, whatever. Like Grumpy Monkey is a brand, a character, but a brand that stands. I mean, it stands by itself. It's a winner, right? Like it's a winner. Was that your only attempt at figuring out a character, or was Grumpy Monkey maybe like fifth in line, but behind Jerry Giraffe and whatever, like how did it hit and work from the get-go?
Well, I mean, as you saw, the book wasn't called Grumpy Monkey in its original form. It was called Grumpy Day. And at some point, when we were already quite far along, we did the thing where we actually, hey, we should Google if there's already a book called Grumpy Day.
Hey, isn't that funny?
And it was.
Also, you do it, and then you're like, wonder if anyone else does that.
Yeah.
Hoping,
So that's
like,
always a good thing to keep in mind. And then it's like, oh yeah, but how about we call it Grumpy Monkey? Oh yeah, that sounds good too. But the story was the same. It was only the title really that changed.
It works perfectly, Grumpy Monkey. It's kind of I don't know if the word is alliteration or whatever, but they're, it goes well together, Grumpy Monkey.
Yeah, and it also, a lot of parents call their kids monkeys.
Yeah.
And
I call mine all the time, and I think of you guys on a regular basis.
Well, our oldest, who was she can get a lot of credit for being the impetus for us to start making books, but we call her Monkey. I mean, that's to this day, she's 10. I still call her my Monkey. So
this is like a really technical question, but it's so blatantly obvious, and you spelled it out. I don't think it was in the Freshly in Freshly Squeezed. I know there was a section that talked about apes and primates and monkeys, etc. So Grumpy Monkey's name is Chimpanzee, right? A chimpanzee is not a monkey. They're both primates, but one's an ape and one's not an ape. A chimp is an ape. It gets very confusing. Yeah. A chimp is an ape, and monkeys have tails. Like, there's differences. And I'm like, I think you spelled it out in one of the books before Freshly Squeezed.
In Up All Night, in the one where he has a sleepover with his whole family. He goes back to his parents and he has a sleepover, and we kind of go into that backstory of why he's called the Grumpy Monkey, and it's because his mother always calls him her little Grumpy Monkey, and he's always going, I'm not a monkey, I'm an ape. Yeah,
it's people. I never knew the difference of that before 3 years ago, and I'm 40. But when I read that, I was like, that's like a genius in itself. Like
Yeah, I mean, at some point we just had to own it. That's where it came from a little bit. I think some of it came from me being German, and in German the words like for primate or ape is much closer to the word we have for monkey, and it's not the same, but it's always some translation language issues. So I wasn't that aware that it was something completely different in English.
I was going to ask that. Like, so the actual nuts and bolts of that is you developed a character. The character was a chimp. You call him Grumpy Monkey. And then was it that after the fact, you're like, oh, wait, a chimp is not a monkey. We have to address that.
Kind of,
yeah.
And the original book was called Grumpy Day. Like, the original idea was Grumpy Day.
And then, it was somewhere where we were because we were already getting it published, and it was in that time that we were working with our editor, and where the name got changed. And we didn't really think too much about it. And then after it came out, it was like, oh, that might be an issue for people. And then we would hear from people who were like, hey, ape is not a monkey. Fair enough. Let's own it. Let's own it. Let's talk about this.
But whether it's coincidental or not, I mean, the reasoning, like the fact that parents call their kids monkeys, it like, you didn't have to make up a excuse. You were like, what? Oh yeah, parents call their kids monkeys. I'm a monkey. All right. Like it worked. Like the resolution showed itself.
Yeah.
But then it's also like, since these books are for kids, it is also important to get it right, so they know. Mm-hmm. And you have different kids. Some kids are really into animals and they completely, wait a minute, that's not a monkey, that's a chimp. A chimp is an ape. There you have kids who completely know. And then you have kids who, they don't think about it too much, but why not use it as a chance to teach a bit of nature? We try to, because also, there's that whole thing with the primates and the apes versus monkeys, which we do want our audience to understand the difference. But then the other thing I'd say is making books about where the characters are animals, while we take a lot of liberties, so much of their original character sparks come from things I'll learn about the actual animal. Like, I like if it's kind of gonna, when you start researching animals, they're so fascinating, they're so funny, like some of their behaviors are so funny, and it lends itself to character development. So that's, I like to at least, we try to ground it.
Yeah.
They're all silly, funny, made up stories, but it's nice to have it grounded in a bit of fact.
But there's also the thing, and if you're all honest about the creative process, I think no one knows really what is going to resonate with an audience. Yeah. So when we were making Grumpy Monkey, we didn't expect it to do that well necessarily. Our first picture books had done okay, but it was
one did and one tanked, so they put it out of print. But they had already. What's that?
Early iterations of Grumpy.
Grumpy Monkey. So Grumpy Monkey's
books.
Our third published book.
Okay.
So the first published book did
okay. Yeah.
Then they wanted a follow, but before they knew how that one would do, they wanted a follow-up to it. So we made this follow-up. It was called Hooray for Kids. Completely tanked. They took it out of print, but they had already, in the original contract that Random House did with us, they had already picked up Grumpy Day, what was called Grumpy Day at that time. So they still had an obligation to do that book, but like we were at that point handed down, like without anybody saying anything, like we were, we switched.
We didn't expect it to do well. To be honest, when we were doing it, we thought this is going to be our last picture.
Yeah. Really.
I think they're going to tell us we're done.
That's really what we thought. We were positive. Like, okay, well, it was fun. Our day jobs are in animation. That's cool. Like, it was nice to try. And, but that's really,
That's the part. That's why I want to talk. And that's why I reached out, because it's like, that's the truth of it, right? I've written 2 books and a million podcast episodes, and like, I think they're great, right? And I think, if only my kids have my books, that's pretty cool. But you never do know what's going to hit and what's not going to hit. And you have no choice but to try and to keep going.
Yeah. But that's also why, like in general, if it's films or books or whatever you're trying to create, I always think you just have to do it, and you just have to put it out there and see if it resonates with people. And luckily these days we live in a time where you can actually put stuff out there, right? Like there are no gatekeepers. Mm-hmm. If you want to put something on YouTube, you can put it on YouTube. If you want to publish it yourself and like sell it through Amazon, you can do that. There are no gatekeepers anymore, really. It does help to have a publishing team and a partner in a big publisher and an editor and the designers and the marketing team. That definitely helps, and it's important. But for coming at it from the creative side, I think ultimately you can just do what you want to do and see if it's going to work, because no one knows for sure what's going to resonate with the people. And sometimes it's just timing, sometimes it's just like the zeitgeist and what people respond to.
I was thinking about the timeliness of especially Freshly Squeezed, and you said that you had written it before the pandemic. Like that book for a kid, well, for me, right? But it's a kid's book. I mean, you couldn't have really picked a more timely, like calming, relaxing, de-stressing, like it's as evident now as it's ever been for young people.
Yeah. We couldn't believe the timing of all that, because we thought, we knew that book was, were you completely finished with it? With the illustration?
No, it was not completely finished, but it was about, like, we had done all the drawings kind of, and
like when the pandemic started, but we were thinking like, my gosh, everyone's gonna, we were actually a little worried, like, because there's a whole thread in that book where Oxpecker, which is the little bird that's kind of Jim's nemesis, frenemy, whatever you want to call her, she's got a cold. She's sneezing, and he's telling, he's like, shouldn't you be home, and all this stuff. And we thought, oh my God, is that gonna, are people gonna be like, what? Is this about the pandemic, or is this gonna upset kids or whatever? But it wasn't at all, like that was just me. That's just how I am in life. Like, why I don't want you to sneeze on me.
Yeah. Boy, a great time for you to be around. Huh?
Yeah. Well, locking down came pretty naturally. I was like, oh, okay.
This is great. Let's just stay this way. I'm the opposite. I cannot stand to like that.
A
I
caged
need to be
beast.
like, yeah,
Yeah,
I
you
literally
gotta
am.
get
I feel
out.
like that.
But the other thing is with picture books that it takes a long time until they come out. It's often a
Yeah.
year in between once we finish the book until it comes out, because it's a product. It has to be printed, it has to be shipped. There's a lot of, it has to get into the shops. There's a lot of things involved.
Yeah.
So the other thing, we were like, when the pandemic first started, kind of, or came up over here, it's like, I mean, I think the general thinking was, by the time this book comes out,
It'll be done.
it will be done. We'll have forgotten about it. Maybe
Yeah.
Suzanne didn't think that. But
A lot more books. Yeah, a lot more books are zeroing in on this topic because it is still here.
Yeah.
You mentioned the publisher, Random House. Is that your publisher? Is that what you
Yeah.
said? So the first one, did you have a publisher for the first two publications? And
those
and
were
how
also
hard
with
was-
Random House.
Okay.
Yes.
So how was that bridge developed from the get-go? Because I feel like that's, I don't know, pretty hard to do.
Yeah.
There was a lot of lucky timing. Again, we had created this mock-up version of this first book about families that we're trying to do. And
then the mock-up of
Yeah.
Grumpy
but
Day.
that was second, yeah. And we had shown it to a book agent friend, who just to get her advice on it. And
Well, we didn't know necessarily that she was still being a book agent.
that's
That
true.
was the thing.
That's true.
It was because our day jobs are in animation. We knew there were a few people that we knew in animation that we thought, like somebody I had worked with who's a illustrator and a children's book author, but who also has had made cartoons. He was somebody that I was like, oh, maybe I can show him our books. And then somebody I knew who, there was an like kind of a literary somebody, well, I don't even know what she was, a producer, but who I knew had a history in children's books, but I didn't at the time think she was still doing it. And she actually, I think was, but she was somebody we sent it to. A couple of people but it was because of working in animation that we knew a few people who maybe were, second degree into
like they had an eye for what.
Yeah, and they also knew that industry,
Yeah.
and we didn't. And so this woman who was producing an animation and had a history with children's books phoned us up after we sent her both things. It was also Grumpy Day that we sent her, and she phoned up and said, you know what? I stopped taking on book clients because I don't really do that. And, it's not my focus anymore, but I actually think I can sell these.
It's cool.
And it was like, really?
It's really cool.
Oh, okay. And that's kind of how it happened. And then very quickly, she had a meeting at Random House, and the president of Random House Children's Books, I believe, is involved, or at the time certainly was involved with charities that for foster children. And that came up in their conversation. We weren't there. We were nowhere near that. We didn't even know they're having a conversation.
Yeah.
But apparently there was some conversation that came up about that. And that's when this woman who was representing our books said, well, I have a book that's about different kinds of families. And it was
That
timing. It was timing. And that's how that door opened.
Yeah, I teach a lot of things by way of my own experiences in books and interviews on the show, and when I speak in front of mostly kids. But that's one of the things that I drive home all the time, is the importance of that. Like, you've got to keep moving forward. You've got to keep trying. You've got to keep outputting, because you never know when that, like, the square peg's going to hit a square hole, and boom, that's it. And like, your lives are heavily affected by that simple, oh, hey, I have a person who has a book about that stuff.
Yeah.
It's crazy how that works.
Yeah, you just don't know. But actually, when you're saying that, that also makes me think of the flip side of that. When you're saying that you tell kids that, I always think of timing when I talk to kids too, like when I go to school, or in the old days, go to schools or whatever. And I'm sure you have this, why it's so important for us to talk to kids and reach out to them, tell them what we do, how it happened, because you never know when you're going to be in front of that room of children and there's that one kid who you're talking to that group, and that one kid just like the light bulb goes off because you've said something. Because that I'm going to make it that to me is Max's origin story. Like in terms of, you were watching, wasn't it the making of The Lion King?
Oh, it's not even that. I just heard about it.
But to me,
I heard about they were making this film. I had seen one image of it, and my cousins told me that a German animator was working on it. And I had always loved Disney films, but at that point, something just switch turned in my head. And I was 11, 12 years at that time. And I was like, oh, maybe I can do that too.
If another
and from that, it was just that I didn't know the name. It was before the internet was really a thing. I couldn't find out about it for years.
But you knew that someone from Germany, from a town in Germany, I think that was what spoke to you.
It was just this like, oh, this is possible. So maybe I can do this too. And then from that point onwards, I was working in that direction. Like sometimes more focused, sometimes less, but it was always there. And it was just because of that, like knowing that it could be an option. Before, it was always a strange world, far away. I didn't even understand how you could do it,
that power connection. I tell it in my talks to schools, but there was a guy who I wrestled with, a small Pennsylvania school, who got signed to the UFC, and I had that same moment. I was like, wait a minute, he's just like me. Like I touched him. We're friends. We're in the same room. Heck, I could do that. And it really put me on. And I always drive that home. And I'll probably use you guys as an example, given these talks in the future, of that same idea. Like there's this kid in Germany who had no idea about anything like that, and just thought, whoa, boom, that could be me. And it is.
You just don't know. But I also think that's why there's such an importance to reaching out to kids, to talking to kids. Because you just don't know which kid at which, you gotta let the cat in, which kid, will suddenly, you say something and it just sparks for that child in that room. And then you've just set somebody up. You don't know.
Yeah. So you had the first published book was the family book. The second one was the Grumpy Day. And then
second one was this one that went out of print almost instantly. It's called Hooray for Kids.
It was a follow-up book to the family's book. It was just about different kinds of kids. It was a nice idea, but it was one of these things that just didn't resonate.
It didn't at all. Not at all. It sold like 3 copies or something.
Yeah. And then Grumpy Monkey was the third book. The Grumpy Day never came out. Like that was something that was just between us. But that was the start of Grumpy Monkey.
Okay. I'm just I like that back end information. So as a family, right? As a couple, it's like, oh well, writer, illustrator. You mentioned the lines do kind of blur a little bit. It's not strictly writer, not strictly illustrator. But what is that like as a family with 2 small kids? I can imagine, if people would be asking me with my kids, like, well, do you like train and fight and wrestle? No, like they're kids. They're exposed to it. But what's it just like for you guys working together, not working together, separate family time, work time, discourse, whether it's family being carried into work being carried into family? What's that dynamic like?
I think a lot of it blends together because luckily making picture books is not like a 9-to-5 job that you have to be on it all the time. So it's not like we're tied together for 8 hours a day. I mean, we're tied together for 24 hours a day doing families, but it's not like working on picture books all the time. It's like that's kind of just whenever we find time, we talk about new ideas and projects. We try to work on them, but it's not.
I think it's slowly getting easier as the kids get older because you've got young kids. It's very hard to finish a conversation with your spouse. It can be hard to finish a sentence with your spouse if the children are in the room. And so I think some people might assume oh, well, you live together, it must be so easy to just, you can talk about it all the time, but it's just the constant interruption. So now there's school is back in person. It makes it easier to talk about stuff, and especially because now Max is still working out of the house. So in the past, when he was most of the time going out to the studio and I was home, we could only have our grumpy monkey and book conversations around children, and that's challenging. That can be challenging. But we would, I think we're good about communicating and trying to schedule time almost to talk about it. But then the other fun thing, of course, is that because it's picture books and it's for kids, they inspire some of it, certainly Grumpy Monkey Up All Night, which is the sleepover one, was in part inspired by our daughter and the first time she had a friend sleepover. And the fact that she was so excited for it, had all these expectations of how it would go, and it didn't go that way at all. Yeah. And so they inspire stories, and they certainly give, they're the first round of child eyes on anything. So we get their take on stuff for sure.
What a perfect test group they are.
Yeah.
And they're quite critical.
Say that again.
They're quite critical.
Yeah.
They're not an easy audience.
Well, if you can get it past them, you get it past anybody. They'll be the most critical.
Yeah.
This is stupid, Dad. Oh,
yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, great.
I would say the graphic novels and like Freshly Squeezed, and then we're working on a second one. Those in particular, that was like, quick, always, especially the 10-year-old, get her in here. Get her, at that time she was probably 8 or whatever. We need to see what she thinks. What has she, like we tell you, has she seen this bit yet? Let's see how she reacts. But you have to do it like not telling her what you're looking. You're like, let her look at it and see what the natural reaction is.
I liked in the Freshly Squeezed. I liked the ape primate part was awesome. And then also the treat part and the language part. So there's like extra little things that make it more than just like reading and the graphics are awesome. Like it's just a pleasing to the eye to look at. But like in Freshly Squeezed, I mean, it's literally like bubbles, the bubble art coming out of the mouth. Not a lot of words, gets the point across, a lot of graphics. But then there's a secret language, like I said, and there's ingredients for this like
frozen banana. Yeah.
And then a kind of like real information section on the apes and primates. Where did that come from? I like books like that. Like my second book has a lot of kind of extra little stuff in it like that. But where did you come up with those ideas?
Well, that is, I love that too. I love that. And I never stop talking about how much I love that. Like, that's why he's laughing right now.
Did you roll your eyes, Max, when I brought these up? You're like, oh gosh, here
we go. She's gonna go on. but that is, so this is all the stuff we're learning about publishing and the different formats in children's books. There's so many different formats. So this, what they in the industry call, I hope it's an early graphic reader or young graphic reader, which basically is young graphic novel for young kids. So that format, as in it these days, what that format implies is that you will have usually 3 chapters broken up by what they call interstitials. Okay. So it's actually inherent in the format. I love that format because I feel like there's it's great for the attention span. It's, because you don't have to feel like as a kid you're sitting, or even as an adult, that you're sitting down and like, oh, I got to read this whole thing, because it's broken up. And I feel like it gives it such a nice energy. And then, so since we knew that we would have the opportunity to do these interstitials, and usually it's chapter, interstitial, chapter, interstitial, chapter. We made, and then sometimes it will have a bonus at the end, which is what we did with learning this secret language. And I think we knew always we wanted to do this Pam Pansy's primate primer, which is the name of the, the mouthful, but Jim's mom's name is Pam. So she's Pam Pansy. And we always knew, because of the whole discussion we had earlier about the monkey versus ape and everything, we always knew if we had the opportunity that we wanted to do this primate primer, and that would be a fixture of this young graphic reader. And then I wanted to then have for the second one, you know, something that would be more of an activity, get kids doing something else. And I to this day, still at Christmas, make these cranberry cookies that I got that recipe out of a book that I read when I was like 9 years old.
Cool.
And so I always remembered, like, oh, it's fun that there was this recipe in this book. So I thought, let's have a recipe, but let's make it something that can be healthy and that you know, a kid could potentially make safely by themselves. So that's where that came from. And then somehow could, you know, you could, if you stretch your mind, imagine that maybe chimpanzees would like to eat that too. And then the secret language bit just came up quite naturally in the writing of the story. At one point, Jim wants to say something to Norman. Norman starts inviting other people along, and Jim's like, he doesn't want him to invite them. And he's like, Zabit, Wabat, you know, he just starts talking in this secret language, and nobody knows what he's saying. So that just came in naturally, the writing, and it is a secret language that, you know, I knew as a kid. I still know. I'm fluent. I'm fluent in English and Ab.
It doesn't do much for you outside of the book.
Abif yabu mabistaber abit yabu kaben tabak wabad yaber frabens alba nabadi dabadi no nabos wabad.
It actually kind of sounds like a real language.
If you can, what I said was, well, if you can master it, you can then talk with your friends and nobody will know what you're saying. And I am telling you, when I was a teenager, my best friend and I were
pretty cool
to each other like this.
That's really cool. I mean, I read it in the book and you see the rules and everything. It's really simple to do, but that actually sounded like a language. I was kind of blown away when you did that. Sorry, Max.
He's like, oh.
So in the you mentioned earlier having gone into schools before in the pandemic, you know, like, I don't know, obviously put the kibosh on that. I've had to develop like virtual programs. I've seen other people do virtual programs. Some authors that I follow and have had on the show have done virtual programs as well. I was trying to, right off the top of my head, I was going to name some of the books, and we can talk a little bit about them afterwards. But do you still do that? Talk about that process, like whether it's, well, one, if you still do it virtually or in person, and then what do you do?
Well, we usually do it when we're asked to. I think it's usually a request, and we're like, yes, of course, we'll do that. And so because of everything being digital, we haven't done it that much because there haven't been that many requests, and everyone is still grappling and figuring things out. And now it's slowly going back to in-person learning. So
we've had a few over this pandemic.
We had a few digital events, but before that, especially Suzanne was doing a lot of like going into schools whenever she was asked and talking to children. And then whenever I had a chance, I would go too.
Yeah, I think what we would do, and whether it's on Zoom or in person, it tends to be, if it's just me, I'm reading to the kids, then we're talking about, you know, the book, and it depends. It always depends on time whether we read more than one story, and also the audience, you know, how chatty or not they are. And we do a lot of talking about, if we're reading the original book in particular, about feelings, about that it's okay to, but I try to guide it. I try to do it with questions so that the kids are giving me the answers. But is it okay to feel grumpy? Is it okay to just talking about the fact that your emotions are valid, but it's about how you express them, and that as long as you don't take things out on other people, or that, you know, we talk about that Jim was pushing it down, lying even to himself that he's not grumpy until he exploded. And we, you know, have that whole discussion about, well, that's not okay. You can't take bad feelings out on other people. And what are good ways to express these feelings? What do you like to, what do you do when you're grumpy? And we kind of had these.
How good is that for kids? Like, not just so Monday through Friday I basically do book commentary on a grown-up book, and then on Tuesdays I put out one it's either for kids or about kids. A lot of those episodes are about books. So I've learned that reading kids books, quote kids books, teach valuable life lessons. So how relevant is that topic right there about emotions to an elementary classroom? Or I've used picture books in high school classrooms and in grown-ups conversations, because those points are so true. And again, the timeliness of it, even though not intentional, now is like the time to talk about that kind of stuff.
Yeah, it's everything, because it's funny, like in the current context of a pandemic, all of the talking about grumpy, sometimes we think, oh, the book's consistently done well through the pandemic, of course, because everyone's grumpy.
Yeah, that's true.
And also because everyone needs to maybe be reassured, and the parents too, that it's okay. It's totally okay. But I think, these discussions are important both for the kids. I find the kids are usually really astute in terms of their, like we can have really good discussions about emotional literacy with children, and they have really good ideas. They also, and it's the other thing I find fun is I'll often ask them, well, what makes you grumpy? And they, so I'll tell you my unofficial polls of children. The top two, and it varies which is first by school, but top two: siblings, parents.
Yeah, I would have guessed siblings. I didn't know what number 2 was though.
Parents. The parents one is always the parents making you do something. So it's parents making me brush my teeth, when my parents make me eat my vegetables. It's kind of, and I think those are the two my parents make me clean up. Any of these kinds of things that parents are making them do that they don't want to do, or my parents say I can't have that toy,
Mean parents. As you were talking about that, and I'm envisioning you asking that question in front of the kids, and Max with you, with both of you with animation and the kids' books, etc. I enjoy speaking to students because it gives me like fuel for life, energy. Like I'm around kids and they've got energy, and it brings me back to being a kid. And it's just like, I think energy is a solid word for it. But do you feel that in your lives, both in animation, both in picture books, like it helps you stay young or active and lively?
Definitely, even though I have to admit, I'm very introverted. I'm very comfortable not being in front of a crowd or a room full of people. But so I'm always a little bit grumbling about it. Before, and
there's
then
a pattern.
There's and then, but then you go into the school and you meet all the kids and you talk to them, and the teachers as well, and anyone really who's in the audience, and it does give you so much back. And it's a polar opposite of me. It's like ahead of the thing, I'm just like, I don't know, why do we have to do this? And after it's like, this is amazing, we should do this.
And it's literally every time, but then he has this short-term memory, he forgets. And then anytime I'm bringing him to an event, he's, blah, blah, blah. And then I'm like, will you stop it? It's wonderful. And then he goes, has the best time. Because when Max goes, and that's the thing, they all go crazy when Max comes, because he adds a whole visual component. So when Max comes to an event, or if we're doing it on Zoom, we have him, he'll, depending on the time and what the age group is, but he'll do a lesson. He'll teach everybody to draw the grumpy monkey. That is the coolest thing to witness. I never tire of it, because every single child in the audience draws a great grumpy monkey, and everyone is so unique, but they are all incredible. And that happens, and that's wonderful. And then he also does a thing where we ask the kids to name different feelings, and he draws the chimpanzee feeling those emotions. And it's really neat because then he also helps them to focus on like, okay, so if you're sad, your eyes, I don't know, you'll say it because I'll get it all wrong. Your eyes get a little small and they might be teary, or, you know, but he'll describe what, so that he's helping children to notice this in people, you know, notice feelings. And it's so great. It's so much fun. I love when he can. I don't
know, an idea. I would pay for a workshop to do that with you virtually. I think that would be awesome. I think that would be really cool. My kids, I have like 4 of them right here to my right, not kids, but their pictures on YouTube. You know, there's professional artists and illustrators who do this like kind of line by line, step by step. Yeah. It's fascinating. You know, my kids are coming to me with pictures like, oh my gosh, you did that? It's pretty cool.
Yeah, it's super cool.
Yeah.
There was one funny one. It was a first grade class we went to, and I don't remember if you were doing just the basic lesson of like just drawing Jim, but for whatever reason, something took off in that class. I think we had done the emotions first, where you were just drawing different emotions. Then we did the lesson. The last feeling that one of the kids had shouted out was sick, like not. So Max drew like Jim looking nauseous, and that like set them all off. They thought that was hilarious. So then he teaches them to draw chimpanzee, and next thing you know, it was just through the room. They are all starting to draw chimpanzee, like throwing up, green face. You know, like I loved that. So it was so funny.
That, man, what an ace in your back pocket that is. That skill to have. That is like, it's I would bet 100% success rate. You'll never fail with that. That's pretty cool.
It's a nice trick. It's weird if you've done it your whole life and you don't necessarily realize that it can be like a magic trick if you draw in front of people. And
to me, it is,
especially if it's happening live, I guess. But as Suzanne said, I have a short-term memory, so I have to be reminded of that
it's fun.
That it's fun.
You always leave really lifted.
Oh yeah. No, it's really, really fun. Just reacting to what the kids shout at you and then drawing that and trying to think in the moment. And
that's the one I can't like that. Try every single time. I'm like, because he's, he doesn't know what the kid's gonna say, and like sometimes every now and then you get a really like, wow, where did you come up with this? I'm trying to think of an example, one that, cautious or something, or like the kid will just shout out and you're like, oh, and I'm there like, oh my God, I hope we can do this.
No, it is like a magic trick, and it's awesome because it puts you in it's like that the flow, like like you're tested, like, oh, I got to come up with this, but you do have the skill set in one way or another, you come out on top. In reality, who's really going to care if it's not that good? No one. You're trying your best.
A lot of it is confidence. Sometimes like, I wish this would have been better, but it's like, what's the next one? Let's keep going.
We're coming up here on an hour, so I'll start to wind down. But the last kind of question I want to ask is with getting told no and or rejection and or the difficult parts of your business. And that could be the writing, like, this stinks, is terrible. The realization, your second book didn't sell, like that stuff hurts. Like whether you whatever, it hurts. It's not fun to be rejected, but you do realize, hey, this is part of the game. But what is, one or two of the most challenging things that you have to contend with or have throughout your creative careers? That can be illustration and or animation and or book writing.
I mean, one thing to say, and then we touched on it before that, is that the importance of timing, right? So once you realize how much of it is timing and luck, and it does help you through moments of rejection, because it's like, it's not necessarily you or the material. It might just not be the right time or person. It might not, maybe it's the material, maybe it's not good enough yet, but maybe not. So you just, but that really takes the edge off of that. I think it's just because something doesn't sell or doesn't resonate, it might just be ahead of its time, or it might, you have not found your audience yet. So that's the one thing I would say with, even if there's rejection, it's, you can, you can caveat it a little bit. So that helps you through that.
Suzanne, I want to hear your take too, but I
Yeah.
definitely want to add this. Dred, who's my partner, who's a creative, written several books and does, like, did a one man show, just very creative person. He had explained to me that idea and he uses, I think he uses specific actor, but actors that they can't time the audition. They just have to go with themselves, like be yourself because you don't know. And there was an example where it was like, the people had lunch at noon, so they just had to get the next one, and the next one got the gig. So he really drives that home for me, like just go with it, right? You are you, go with it. It might hit, might not.
Yeah. But the other important part is, and it's going to sound corny, but you have to play the game to win, right? Like you still have to do it. You have to keep making your stuff. And I think that's one of the big challenges, is just making it. Keeping that momentum going, and just, even though you don't know if it's going to go somewhere, you still have to keep making it. And then at some point someone might ask, hey, do you have an idea for that? And if you then in that moment you actually have that idea, then that might be your foot in the door. And that but if you don't have it, then you're not setting yourself up for the opportunity to have that luck and that good timing. So that is definitely one of the big challenges, I think, in general in the creative process. You just, like, there's so many people who talk about making stuff or that want to do stuff. It's not about books or films or whatever. It's anything really. Like, the difference is, are you just talking about it or you're just making it? Making it, you don't need a publisher for that. You can just make it for yourself, whatever it is. You can come up with a concept, with an idea, and that is usually, in my experience, the biggest hurdle and the biggest difference between the people, like the people who are actually making stuff or the people who are just talking about it. And it doesn't guarantee you anything, but you have to be among the group of people who are actually putting in the time to even get anywhere, I think.
Yeah. It's the same thing with fighting. A lot of people like to post their picture with gloves on, but it's like, you actually got to fight. And if you ever want to go somewhere, you actually have to get in there and win. Like, you got to, but to win, you got to go in there. So you can apply that to wherever. And then Suzanne, what's your take on that question?
Well, it's kind of very much what Max just said. And it's very much the lesson that I learned from Max, and it took years and years and years for me to, I'm my own worst enemy. And, that for years, I always thought, well, yeah, there are ideas I have, but that's not important. What's important is my day job. And what's important is just focusing on, basically when I worked, writing for animation and particularly producing animation, I thought, well, no, my role is to help other people realize their vision. And that's my role. It's not about, and yes, I have my own ideas. And yes, I kind of secretly wish I could be working on my own things, but that's not, I have to put that to the side because I have to earn a living. And Max used to always say to me, and it was years of it, because Max is really good and has always been really good about, no, just what he said, if I have an idea, I'm just going to make it for myself. Like, I don't care. I can't leave it in my head. It has to come out. And he would, for years, you've gotta just, like, we should be doing stuff together. We should be working on things. I will after I finish my other work. Yeah, I will after I finish my other work. And it took forever to to get me to the point where I could mentally put our stuff and my stuff first. And part of that, yes, of course, comes out of a financial anxiety of just, you have to earn a living, but you also don't have to lie around watching TV all weekend or whatever. So,
and it's cool too, like, to hear you guys talk about that, because the rules and lessons, they apply to life across the board, whether you're kids book creators, fighters, teachers, whatever, just, parenting in general. There's a lot of that stuff, but it's refreshing and reassuring to hear, you guys deal with it, have dealt with it, that, like, do I take that step forward? Do I not? Financial security, like, I got to pay my bills. Like, it's just a real part of life. And that's, I'm really, like I said, excited to have been able to talk to you guys. I'm a brand loyal fan, meaning I'll buy whatever you write. So for both myself and my kids and the show. But as we kind of close out the Grumpy Monkey. Oh, I want to tell this before I forget. The first Grumpy Monkey that I read that really turned me on to this series and this character, I was reading it and I was sitting in the living room. My kids were on either side. My wife was in the kitchen and I was reading it. And it was like, my son was a little bit too young, but it was like my daughter, my wife, and me came to the same realization that I'm a grumpy monkey at the exact same time. And it was as if everyone looked up and looked at each other and didn't have to say a word and just knew. And I think my daughter actually said, like, Dad, it's something like, is this you? Is this about you? Or this is you? It was really funny. And I just had to kind of like bitterly swallow. So yeah, that's kind of me.
It's okay to be a grumpy monkey.
Yeah, that's what I learned. That's what I told him. And I just went on being grumpy the rest of the night.
Oh my God, that made my day. That's great.
Yeah.
But, there's the 3 Grumpy Monkey picture books, the young graphic novel book, the Christmas one that comes out in September, as well as the young reader books that are coming out, the leveled 1 and 2. Where's the best place for people to, well, obviously those, whether it's Amazon, your website, where should people reach out to you? Where should they get the books?
Of course, local bookshops is always
Yeah.
a good one.
We've been so supported by independent booksellers, and so we are really grateful for that. I will also say Barnes and Nobles has also been really supportive of our work. But your local bookseller is always good. That's all. It's not easy. It's not easy 100%. To run a small business.
Yeah. So, but in general, you can get them anywhere, and if we have a Facebook page that
like
people can get in touch with us. I think that's the best way.
Yeah. If you just Google Grumpy Monkey, Suzanne Max Lang, Lang, you'll be able to find it. And I can't recommend them enough. And I'm excited to, like I said, continue to shout their name when the new ones come out. You've got a fan and a friend, and I appreciate everything. And I look forward to reading more of your books in the future.
Well, thank you so much for having us.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
My pleasure.